Let's bring in the group chat. Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and MS Now international affairs analyst, joins us. And here with me, Alex Wagner, MS Now senior political analyst. She took a 6 a.m. train from Long Island. She's getting all the questions today, especially about SpaceX. Ronen Son is here, MS Now business analyst and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack. And David Rode, MS Now senior national security reporter. Ambassador McFaul, based on what we heard from the president this morning, how do you think the rest of the summit is going to go?
Well, the main goal is no drama, right? I just got back from Europe. I just flew in from Sweden last night to be on your show, not a train from Long Island.
There you go.
And, and stops in, I was in Estonia, Finland, and Sweden, and the mood there is anxiousness. We just need to get through the summit without some dramatic move that suddenly Trump says we're going to pull all of our soldiers out of Europe. And that, of course, to me is tragic. That's the goal of have no drama, because there's real drama in Europe. There's the biggest war in Europe since World War II. We, the United States of America, President Trump, has chosen not to share the burden. He talks about burden sharing all the time with NATO. I just want to remind people that when it comes to helping the Ukrainians, we are doing virtually nothing. The Europeans are sharing this burden. They're carrying the burden. We are not. I think that's tragic, because I think it is in America's national interest to keep the peace in Europe, to not let the war spread to NATO allies, to drag us into a war in Estonia or Lithuania. And the fact that the president doesn't frame it in those strategic interests is disappointing for me. But I think everybody in Ankara is just, let's get through this. Let's hope that we have no drama. That will be considered a success.
Trump is asking why the U.S. spends so much on NATO and European defense. And I want to share how one expert explained it to NPR. They said, as much as we complain about deadbeat Europeans, we have never wanted the European Union to become a forceful defense actor, because it would undermine our influence in Europe. What do you think about that?
And our defense industry. I mean, they're talking about $300 billion in new contracts going for American weapons coming out of this. And then I was on a call on Sunday with White House officials, sort of a preview of the NATO summit. And this word hasn't been used yet, but I think it might raise its ugly head. They were asked by another reporter about Greenland. And the reporters said, and the White House officials said that the best way to resolve Greenland still at this point, this White House official said, is for the U.S. to acquire Greenland. They're still talking about acquiring Greenland. I asked a question about, look at the Ukrainians. They're actually gaining territory on the ground for the first time since the war started. They're carrying out these strikes on Moscow. There's nationwide gas shortages in Russia. And the answer from one of the U.S. officials was, the front lines have been frozen for the last 2 months. And that's just not factually correct. And they also threatened again that the U.S. would pull troops out of Europe. So you would think this is a moment for Trump and NATO to pressure Putin. He is losing this war. There are huge gas lines across Russia. And instead, Trump is threatening Europe.
The Secretary General is leaning into this idea of NATO 3.0, which is what the Pentagon called the push to make Europe more responsible for their own defense. And also there's this promise to buy American. What's your take on all this?
First of all, I think there are general strategic interests that the United States has, that Europe has. And then I think that there's this sort of central organizing principle of all of this, which is Trump's ego. The reason it's happening in Turkey is because Trump is increasingly aligned with Erdogan. The reason Trump is going after NATO right now, I think, in particular, has to do with Iran hangover. He was humiliated domestically and internationally by a disastrous war of choice. And he's looking for a fall guy. He wants desperately to say, NATO didn't come to my rescue. This is a question of loyalty and honor keeping, whatever. This is a president who launched a war without consulting any of our allies. They refused to clean up his mess, and now he's mad because all of his toys are broken. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the reason he's not interested in Ukraine and Russia is because he couldn't end the war in a week like he said he would upon inauguration. It's complicated. He doesn't like hard things. And he'd much rather spend his capital and his time focusing on things that can deliver an immediate boost to his ego. And in this case, it's making NATO a scapegoat.
He doesn't even call it a war now. This morning, he said it's just a special military operation. I want to share more of what the president said today. Watch this.
If you count the 4 years where we had a rigged election, I was very much into politics then, too. But I spent the first 4 years, I spent 4 years in a little different state, And then we've had an amazing, probably the best year maybe ever had by an American president.
I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. I mean, we haven't had the best year of any president. I mean, there's so many different eras that you could describe in that way.
If there was a follow-up question, I'm guessing his answer would have been the stock market performance.
Yeah, and who cares? I mean, the stock market's up, and the ownership of stocks, I will admit, has broadened out now to be the largest since the year 2000. More households own stocks than at any time since the peak of the dot-com bubble. Having said that, the actual ownership is concentrated among the top 1%, and they really control the large majority of stock market wealth. So there is still this wide disparity. And then when you put it across, the overall economy, we're growing at about a 2% rate, which is on par with other averages that we've seen. It's nothing to write home about. Inflation's still too high. The labor market's still a little dodgy. And so he continues to run this line about a golden age or this being the best period in U.S. economic history. And it doesn't even compare to any of the periods in which the U.S. has been extremely strong economically. The 90s were stronger. The 80s were stronger. In certain respects, even the 1970s, with all the problems that they had, we saw more economic growth than we have today.
Ambassador, the war in Ukraine is on the agenda this week. Obviously, before he left, Trump said they're closer to ending it than people realize. Bloomberg is reporting that Zelensky is going into NATO more confident this year. What does that signal to you?
Well, I don't know why the president's confident that they're going to settle and end the war. He said that today in his press conference. I don't know what's changed recently. I think on the battlefield, Ukraine is on the offensive. They're making strikes deep into Russia with these mid-range strikes drones. They're hitting the supply lines. That's the good news from President Zelensky's point of view. The bad news is they've run out of missile defense interceptors. They've run out of PAC-3s. Now, run out, maybe I'm exaggerating, but they are really low in the stockpile of these. These are made by America, Lockheed Martin, and I don't understand why we can't get them more missile defense interceptors. That, to me, should be the #1 priority issue for the NATO summit. How do we save more Ukrainian civilians? That's a very concrete thing that they should focus on. These abstract conversations about 4%, 5%, NATO 3.0, those are great things to talk about for the future. Today, we need to save Ukrainian lives, and I hope that gets more attention on Ankara than it has up to this point.
Alex, you've been covering this conflict for more than 4 years. Where do you think things stand?
Listen, oh my God, if I had a crystal ball, I think first of all, the fact that this is the most obvious thing to say, but the fact that we're still talking about the war, the fact that we're still talking about it being fought and being, however you want to characterize it, is a testament to the tenacity and the bravery of the Ukrainian and the ingenuity of the Ukrainian fighting forces. And I think the rest of the world recognizes, as David said, that and as the ambassador said, we're at a hinge point here, and the United States has the ability to make things meaningfully different and meaningfully more advantageous for the Ukrainians. But how and whether and if we do that depends on the idiosyncrasies and whims of a mad king. I mean, it's just look, if they need something concrete from the United States, it's going to be a series of sort of soft shoe dances to and around Trump to encourage him to give in to the most obvious thing he should do because it services his own ego. I mean, all of this comes down to one man.
The reason that there aren't enough interceptors going to Ukraine is because they were used in the war against Iran. Full stop. And just earlier today, Iran.
Point. Yeah.
No, and then earlier today, Iran fired on a ship in the Strait of Hormuz yet again. They control the Strait of Hormuz. We have lost the war. I mean, Ron asked me before we came on, are we back at war? And I was like, no, we've lost the war. And the MOU was signed on June 17th, starting this 60-day frame to negotiate these talks. It's three and a half weeks later. There's no progress at all in the talks.
There's maybe not going to ever be talks. Yeah. I mean, this is just plausible deniability for the Iranian nuclear program and saying we tried. But the idea that this administration with two real estate guys at the helm, I mean, all respect real estate guys, is not going to negotiate anything even approaching the JCPOA. I mean, the idea that they are serious about ending Iran's nuclear ambitions is a joke. This is just about plausible deniability.
Ambassador, let's go back to the summit because Trump said he was only going because it was hosted by Erdogan, Turkey's leader. That's who he met with first. And all of that happened after Netanyahu, in the last 2 days, urged him to rein in the Turkish president. Obviously, Erdogan is a fierce critic of Israel's war in Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran. I mean, Donald Trump has an extraordinarily close relationship with Tom Barrack, who is our ambassador in Turkey. I am sure Tom Barrack was working. He understands Trump and the psyche of Trump. He's been in business and been friends with him for north of 40 years. Why Turkey? What is this all about? And what does it signal to not just Netanyahu, but to the world that he's basically rolling up like Erdogan's my boy?
Well, the president did make news today when he said we're looking into lifting sanctions and looking into selling F-35s to Turkey. That was big news. To me, it underscores what you all were just talking about, the over-personalization of American foreign policy. It's all about Trump and his personal relationship with Erdogan, or now he's he's had a bad set of weeks with the prime minister of Italy. It's all about the personal relationship. And he never talks about American strategic interests. He never talks about American values, by the way, right? The fight in Ukraine is not just about security. It's about democratic Ukraine versus autocratic Russia. He never talks in those terms. It's all about his personal relationship with this leader or that leader. And that is not the way diplomacy is traditionally practiced by American presidents. Their job is to serve American national interests, not Trump's personal interests.